Because of why I search the deep through endless nights, no time to sleep. The call inside I can't deny. I'll find the light because of why.
Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a question I'm sure you've heard before. Why are there no snakes in Ireland? It's a story that most of us think we know, with the famous saints and all. But the real answer is this amazing mix of geology, history, and mythology. So let's get right into it.
So the first thing that pops into your head, of course, is St. Patrick. It's probably one of the most famous legends tied to the Emerald Isle. But is that what really happened? Is there any truth to it at all?
I mean, you can just picture it, can't you? The single holy man standing on a cliff, staff in hand, performing this absolutely epic miracle, cleansing an entire country of its slithering serpents. It's a really powerful story, and it's been told for centuries. But, as we all know, a great story doesn't always mean it's the true story.
And here's our first major clue that we're probably dealing with a myth. The story didn't actually appear when St. Patrick was alive. In fact, the very first time it shows up in writing is way later, in the 11th century. For historians, that is a massive red flag.
Just let that sink in for a second. St. Patrick lived in the 5th century. The snake story doesn't show up in any written records for another 600 years. 600 years. That massive gap tells you this is a tale that grew over time. It's a legend that got added to his story centuries after the fact. There is just zero historical evidence that he actually did this.
Okay, so if we can pretty much rule out the patron saint of Ireland, we're left with a huge question. What is the real, scientific reason Ireland is completely snake-free? Well, the answer is even more powerful than a saint's miracle.
That's right. The real reason is the last ice age. And to understand how, we have to rewind the clock, like over 10,000 years ago, back when the map of Europe looked totally different than it does today.
You see, the simple fact that Ireland is an island, well, that's the key to this whole puzzle. Being surrounded by all that water created a really unique situation as the world started to thaw out.
Okay, so think of it like this, like a race against a series of closing gates. As the ice melted, about 15,000 years ago, land bridges popped up, connecting Europe, Britain, and Ireland. So animals started migrating north. Now, the gate to Britain stayed open long enough for lots of animals, including 3 species of snake, to make it across. But here's the catch. The land bridge to Ireland was lower. It flooded with meltwater way earlier, slamming that gate shut before the slow-moving snakes could ever get there. And the result of that gate slamming shut early is, well, it's pretty striking. Ireland has just one single native land reptile, the viviparous lizard, which must have scurried across just in the nick of time. Great Britain, right next door, has 6 native reptiles, including those 3 types of snakes. The geology really does tell the whole story here.
Okay, so the science seems pretty clear on this one. But hold on, there's another theory, one that's really popular online, that says maybe we're reading this whole story wrong. What if the snakes weren't animals at all, but some kind of metaphor?
So this theory goes that the snakes actually represent the pre-Christian religions of Ireland, and the story is really a secret allegory for St. Patrick violently purging the island of its pagans and druids. It's a really compelling and dramatic idea.
But here's the problem. Just like the original legend, this theory is also a modern invention. The actual historical facts of 5th century Ireland just don't support the idea of some big, violent holy war.
Yeah, the historical record tells a completely different story. The conversion of Ireland was a really slow process. It took centuries, and it was more of a blending than a conquest. Pagan traditions were absorbed. Old gods became new saints, and a lot of druids actually became priests. And maybe the biggest giveaway? Christian writers back then absolutely loved to brag about conquering pagans. If Patrick had led some kind of violent purge, they would have been shouting it from the rooftops, not hiding it in a metaphor about snakes.
This quote from historian Julianne Osborne McKnight just nails it perfectly. The reality wasn't a story about conflict. It was about cultures merging and adapting. This idea of some big dramatic showdown is something we invented much, much later. So, the real story of Ireland's conversion is one of syncretism, which is just a fancy word for a peaceful blending of beliefs. Old traditions merged with new ones over hundreds of years. They weren't just wiped out in a violent conquest. So why do these stories even exist? Well, the answer is this word, hagiography. The stories written about St. Patrick were never meant to be objective historical reports. They were meant to be inspirational tales written to make him sound like a larger-than-life folk hero, fighting dragons and defeating evil, or in this case, snakes.
So at the end of the day, we have two really compelling myths and one scientific fact. The legend isn't about a real miracle, and it's not about a secret holy war. The truth behind why Ireland has no snakes is a much grander story, one that was written by geology, ice, and the rising sea.
And it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, doesn't it? We build these incredible myths around powerful people, but so often the truly powerful forces that shape our world are these slow, massive, impersonal changes in our environment. The melting of ice and the rising of the sea had a way bigger impact on Ireland's biology than any single person ever could have.
So what do you think about the power of these historical myths? I'd love to know your take. Let me know down in the comments below.
And if you enjoyed digging into the truth behind this legend, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives just like this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.